Good morning, children, and welcome to your literature class. This morning, we will be doing Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. Now, as I've told you before, also, children, poetry is something that is felt. It's the voice of the soul. You just cannot read poetry, like you read a story or you read a play. You have to feel poetry. And when you read this poem, and poetry always has an underlying meaning to it. Now, Matthew Arnold, who has written Dover Beach, he was a Victorian poet who lived uh, between 1822 and 1888. So, before we go further, I will first give you a little background information on Matthew Arnold because the poets, when they wrote, it was because of things that affected them, things that they felt deeply. So the age in which they lived, the social conditions, the background of that era, all that played a very, very large part in what they said and what they felt. So before we go on to the actual explanation, I would like to tell you a little bit about Matthew Arnold and the background to Dover Beach. Matthew Arnold was a Victorian poet. That means he wrote in the Victorian age. Now, what kind of an environment or a society was there in the Victorian age? First of all, children, the Victorian age was an age of development in science and technology, and also in industrialization and urbanization. The impact of all this, of the development, changed the mindset of the people. Therefore, you can understand that it was a very turbulent society. In spite of imperialism, at this time, a very famous scientist, Charles Darwin, he came up with the theory of the origin of the species. Now, what was this theory about? This theory, according to Darwin, it stated that man developed from apes. Okay, and this idea, it challenged the biblical beliefs of the people. That man was created by God. Adam and Eve, Adam, the first man, was created by God. And now this added to the confusion, and this led to an erosion of traditions, of values, and a loss of faith. A loss of faith in God and religion, and therefore faith and religion, they both declined, and society was filled with doubts, confusions, and uncertainties, and the very existence of religion was threatened. Thus, we find that the Victorian age was an age that was torn between science and religion. And even now, we can identify with that, isn't it? Because we also sometimes we tend to, believe in science and the things that are coming out, but at the same time, we Indians were very, very deeply religious in nature. Indians on the whole, and therefore we also now find this, this confusion between science and religion. Matthew Arnold was a very deeply religious man, and therefore Darwin's theory and this influence, it made him question the existence of God and the whole Christian scheme of things. He regrets the loss of faith in God and religion in the contemporary society. That means his society in the Victorian age. It was at this time, now we come to the title of the poem, Dover Beach. It was at this time that he paid a brief visit to the southeast coast of England, that is Dover Beach, with his wife. And over here, Matthew Arnold was inspired to write Dover Beach. And this it shows Matthew Arnold's general outlook at the time. And when he looked out at the sea, you see, he was in a room, isolated in a room with his wife, and it was a night, it was evening, twilight, and he was standing at the window and looking out. And then he invites his wife, and when he talks about the sea, naturally he is looking out from the cliffs, towards the cliffs of Dover. And when he looks out, the sea for him, it represents the sea of faith, the faith of the people. The tone of the poem is elegiac in nature. That means, in simple English, nothing to get worried about. Dover Beach is an elegy. What is an elegy? An elegy is a mournful or plaintive poem, a lamentation. Naturally, because he's sad. He's upset, he's confused, he's bewildered about the loss of faith, as well as the poem is a dramatic monologue. What is a dramatic monologue? Monologue means single. So it's a dramatic monologue as the poet addresses the poem to a silent audience who over here happens to be his wife. In dramatic monologue, the action is always internal. The poem is also melancholy in nature. I hope you know the meaning of melancholy. It's sad, it's depressive in tone, and it reflects the poet's state of mind. Now, before we go any further, children, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put a clip of Dover Beach. You also take out your books and but don't refer to the books. I'll say just close your eyes, get into the feel of it. Imagine that you are with Matthew Arnold and you're alone on that moonlit, dimly lit beach of Dover, where you know the cliffs of Dover, they're made of limestone, so they're white in color. Therefore, the moonlight, it illumines the cliffs, and you can just imagine in your mind the quietness of the place, the isolation of the place. You are with your loved ones. At the same time, the only sound which will be very, very intense because everything else is so quiet. You will hear the sound of the sea coming in. You will hear the sound of the waves. You will hear the sound of the shingles, of the pebbles. Just get into the feel of the poem. Listen to it with your eyes closed. Close your eyes and just listen to the recitation. And after that, we will start with the explanation of the poem. Enjoy the poem. It's a beautiful poem. It's a classic.
The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, the moon lies fair. Upon the straits, on the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin. Tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles, long ago, heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear, and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain, and we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies flash by night.
Now, girls, you have heard the poem, and I think you must have read it too. We will start with the explanation now, but before we begin, just let me tell you a little bit about the setting. Dover Beach is on the southeast shore of England and is separated from France by the English Channel. The cliffs at Dover are white, as I've already told you, due to the limestone, and this makes the cliffs look luminous. The sea over here in this poem is used as a metaphor and provides the setting of the poem. Matthew Arnold is visiting with his wife, Frances Lucy Whitman, and he addresses her in the poem. So it is a moonlit night, the sea is calm, the tide is full, and the dim lights are visible on the French coast across the English Channel. Now, please open your textbooks to page 26, Dover Beach, and we will begin. The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits. So, the poem begins on a note of serenity. The sea is calm. Underline the word calm. The sea is calm, the tide is full, the moon lies fair upon the straits. So what feeling do you get? A feeling of peace, a feeling of calm, a feeling of beauty, a feeling of serenity. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. Okay? The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast. Why is it glimmering? It is glimmering, as I told you, because of the luminosity in the moonlight. Out in the tranquil bay. Again, tranquil, the use of the word tranquil. Tranquil means peaceful, underline tranquil. Out in the tranquil bay. And then he addresses his wife. Okay, come to the window. Sweet is the night air. Now, this is the relevance of the dramatic monologue. He invites his love to come to the window. Okay, and then he says, so far in the first few lines, what is the sense that you're getting? It's calm, it's beautiful, it's luminous, it's tranquil, the night air is sweet. And then he uses the word only. Now, what does the word only stand for? The word only, it introduces a note of disquiet, because we use only when something is out of sync. Okay, like but. This, it's calm, it's beautiful, it's tranquil, but therefore only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land. Listen. Now the poet is asking you to listen. You hear the grating roar. Okay? Now listen. When he says listen, up till now, he has asked us, and he's asking us to use our sense of sight. Okay, our sense of sight has been heightened, but now he is asking us to use our sense of hearing. Okay, listen. So when you listen, what is he asking you to listen? How does he describe the sound? Okay, listen, you hear the grating roar. Underline grating. Okay, because this is a harsh, discordant note, grating roar. Okay, now a harsh, discordant note is being introduced into an otherwise calm and peaceful scene. So what is the roar? The roar is the roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling. So the roar of the waves is not a soft sound. The beautiful scene is suddenly disrupted by a sense of harshness, a sense of sadness, okay, which draw back, the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand. So if you have been to a beach, and if you've not been to a beach, if you've seen the slide carefully, you will see that when the wave comes in, the wave brings in a little bit of grit and sand and pebbles. And then when the wave goes back, that is left on the beach, right? And then he says that at the return of the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin. So what note that you get? A note of eternal, something that has been happening and will keep happening over and over again. So it begins, it ceases, but it doesn't stop there. It begins again with tremulous cadence slow, and brings the eternal note of sadness in. Now we have a sense of sadness. The poet is trying to communicate the fact that this is eternal. The sadness is eternal. Okay, eternal. It is important because he's a 19th century poet, he's a Victorian poet, and suddenly after this, we find that he goes on and he talks about another very, very, very famous philosopher in the next stanza, and how he links this eternal note of sadness. Then you see the importance of the word eternal, because eternal is something that carries on, right? So something that does not stop, something that begins, ceases, and begins again, the cycle, the continuous cycle. This is stanza 1. The next stanza: Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. Who is Sophocles? Sophocles is a Greek dramatist of the 5th century BC. Okay, and Sophocles, he also he was very affected by the times in which he was living, and uh, he is famous for his tragic tales, Sophocles. Okay, so Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean. Aegean, Aegean is the sea between Greece and Asia Minor, and it brought into his mind the turbid. Turbid means muddy and confused. Underline turbid, muddy and confused. This is important because you see it is reflecting the state of Arnold's mind. The sea that he's looking out at is reflecting the state of Arnold's mind. So when Sophocles was looking out onto the Aegean Sea and he heard this, it brought into his mind the turbid, the muddy, the confused ebb and flow of human misery. Okay, human misery, that means the note of sadness. What is the misery? Wretchedness. The life that human beings lead, the wretched life, the miserable life. We find also in the sound a thought. Who is the we? We over here is Arnold. That means both of us. Just like Sophocles many, many, many hundreds of years ago had that thought of the wretchedness of human misery while watching the ebb and flow of the waves. The same way, in a similar manner, now we find that Matthew Arnold, he's looking out across the channel, and he also, the same thought is occurring to him about the misery of human life. Find also in the sound of thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. See the difference? It's in two different parts of the world. The Aegean Sea is the sea between Greece and Asia Minor, and over here he is Matthew Arnold is at the distant northern sea, though so many hundreds of years apart, though in two different corners of the world, yet both had the same thought because both were in a similar situation. Okay, so Matthew Arnold says that he has had the same kind of experience that was felt by Sophocles so many years ago. Just like Sophocles listened to the sound of the ocean on the Aegean Sea and found a note of sadness in that sound, and the sound reminded him of all the confusion, all the misery, all the distress that was prevailing in human life. And this is what, influenced his tragic plays. I had told you a little before that Sophocles was famous for his tragic plays and tales. Okay, and now in this situation, just like Sophocles, Arnold too, when he's looking out at the sea, he is reminded of the eternal human misery as he listens to the sound of the ocean. Okay, so both of them having similar thoughts. Sophocles heard it. Sophocles heard what? Sophocles heard the sound of the sea, the roar of the sea. Okay, and this becomes this sound, this flow of pain and misery, the ebb and flow, this becomes an extended metaphor for Matthew Arnold in the 19th century. See, one is in the 5th century, one is in the 19th century. But you see how society, feelings, literature, thoughts, everything is connected in literature especially. Okay. And so what is Arnold trying to impose on our minds? That misery is nothing new. Okay, misery is something that has been felt hundreds of years ago, just like how Sophocles had heard it and felt it hundreds of years ago. So this is now the link, eternal. You see the word eternal? The poet, Matthew Arnold, he links the past to his present. He has the same thought as Sophocles sitting in the distant northern sea. Now we come to the third stanza, which is the stanza in which the conflict, okay, we come across the conflict that is in the poet's mind and how it translates into his poetry. Okay, he talks about the sea of faith. Right at the very introduction, I had told you that the sea of faith actually stands for the faith in God and religion. And it was turbulent times because of Darwin's theory, because of the loss of religion. And all this now is reflected in this stanza. Okay, and there are some beautiful similes and metaphors that are used in this stanza to explain the loss of faith, how faith once would protect us, and now after the loss of faith and religion, how the people are vulnerable, they're naked. Okay, they're not protected anymore by that comfort, by that girdle of faith. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. So that now the poet says that once the sea of faith, that means this this covering, this mantle, this protection of religious faith that we had, once upon a time, it was all in all, it was full, it was absolutely up to the brim, and it was round the earth's shore. It lay like the folds of a bright girdle. What's a girdle? A girdle is a belt, okay, that is tied around the waist. Now this is simile, and the girdle is a belt which protects, it encircles the waist. And this girdle of faith would keep us protected, because man, even now, what is our recourse? Our recourse is to God, right? Whenever we are upset, whenever we are in confusion, whatever, that deep-seated belief is there that we are protected by our faith, by our religion, by God. So the sea of faith was, see the past tense. Okay, he's using the past tense. The sea of faith was once too, at that point of time, at the full, and round the earth's shore. Round the earth's shore, the sea is being used as a metaphor. So just as the sea is encircling the earth, like that, the sea of faith encircled mankind. And it lay, this girdle of faith, it lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. So there was no confusion, there was I won't say there was no sadness, but there was still that hope. It was not just an eternal sadness, okay? And a girdle, it enfolds, it protects, it contains. Thus, faith gave our lives a lot of meaning. You know, in a way, faith is the cable, is the rope that was keeping people down, keeping people grounded. Okay, and what happens? Then he says that, but now, again the word but is like only, okay, but now I only hear its melancholy, long, withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. But now I only hear. Okay, so he says that now what has happened is this faith, which once protected us, the sea of faith, it is now removed, and therefore everything has become muddy and confused. Okay, the sea of faith is receding, and now he can only hear the long, melancholy withdrawing. Withdrawing means moving away. Faith is being withdrawn, okay? Religion is being withdrawn. People are becoming more of a scientific bent, okay? Long withdrawing roar. And over here, breath over here means lamentation, the breath of the wind, okay? The breath of the night wind. But now I only hear long, sad, withdrawing roar. That means why long? Long because eternal, that continuous, retreating going back to the breath, the lamentation, the sadness of the night wind. So the breath of the night wind, like just supposing girls, now you see monsoons are on, and sometimes when it storms before it can rain, you hear the wind whistling through the trees, especially at night when it's very dark. There are some people who love the rain, who love the wind, who love the breeze, but sometimes it sounds a bit eerie, isn't it? It sounds sad. It sounds like there's like a sort of a howling sound. Okay, so retreating to the breath of the night wind. The night wind over here, where he is on the sea, where he is on the beach looking out to the sea, the night wind sort of, when he hears the night wind, he thinks of the lamentation of the human soul, the lamentation of Matthew Arnold, because the sea of faith is dwindling, it's withdrawing, it is going back. And now he gives us a picture of bleakness. Down the vast edges, drear. Okay, a bleak picture. And naked shingles of the world. So the pebbles on the beach, when the wave retreats and leaves the pebbles on the beach. What are shingles? Shingles are small pebbles, okay, and sometimes they're a bit sharp. So just like that, when the waves retreat and they leave the pebbles on the coast, they leave it clear, they leave it open, like that. When faith is taken away from us, now that faith is being taken away from us, it is leaving mankind vulnerable, naked, okay, no more protected. And see the sound, the auditory sound, okay, the shingles are sharp, naked, vulnerable. Our faith is becoming eroded. And the Victorian society, they were facing this problem, certain thinkers, okay, in which Matthew Arnold was included. So the breaking of faith, they feel vulnerable, and the poet himself feels very, very vulnerable. And then the world now is devoid of faith, and what is left when it's withdrawing, just like the sea is withdrawing and leaving the naked shingles on the shore, like that, faith is withdrawing, and in its place, mankind was facing spiritual crisis. Okay, how? In the shape of doubts, confusions, uncertainties. Okay, you connect with, I think, the second stanza where he says, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow, turbid, muddy, confused. Okay, so open to a lot of sadness, a lot of mixed kind of emotions and thoughts, and the harsh reality that is shown by the naked shingles. Okay, and this is what leaves the poet sad and dejected, upset, that there is nothing that is going to protect us now. The girdle that enfolded us, the girdle of faith, that is slowly retreating, and in its place there is only a lamentation of the night wind. And this is bringing us to the brink of a structured and healthy society. Okay, and all that it is doing, it's leaving mankind, it's leaving us open, vulnerable to the to all the influences which is taking away our faith in the world. Now, girls, we've seen in the last stanza how the poet Matthew Arnold, he dealt with the crisis of faith. You know, that is the central theme of the poem. Okay, the poet's reactions to this crisis, and the sadness. Okay, the sadness is not just a feeling, it's a thought, it's a feeling which is echoed by nature. How is it echoed by nature? It's echoed by the sound of the night breath. It is echoed by the nakedness of the shingles. Okay, Victorian society was in a lot of turbulence, and because of this crisis of faith, because of this, there was a crisis of faith in the contemporary society. And that note of sadness, you know, the melancholy of the human lot. Why? because we have lost faith. He says, now I only hear is melancholy, withdrawing row. And you compare this with the full row in the first stanza, where he says that, let me find it. Okay. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling. Okay. And over here it is the ebbing away. And then he goes on to say, you see, that we in our quest, in the quest for scientific knowledge, in this quest for scientific theory, we are abandoning faith. Faith is being abandoned, and this is harming the human soul, the human being it is harming. Now, in the last stanza, we come to where this also is a bit of a pessimistic stanza, where he describes the beauty of the world, and yet he contrasts it that though it looks beautiful, yet the beauty is just an illusion. There is no substance to it, because what is important, the joy, the love, the peace of mind, that is not available now anymore, because faith has been withdrawn. Okay, so he says, our love, let us be true to one another. Who is he addressing? Now he is addressing his beloved. Okay, and he turns from the scene before this, that means stanza 3, to his beloved, and says that in this world where nothing is certain, okay, at least the thing that they have, the ray of hope that is held out, is in the love between two human beings. So he says, let us be true to one another. And no matter what uncertainty we face, at least our love must be true. For the world which seems to lie before us, again the word which seems, okay? The world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. So, the slight note of desperation, the poet compares the world to an illusion. Nature is beautiful, but we should not be misled by this beauty, by this illusion. Why? Because you dream and you wake up to harsh reality. Over here, you see, you always score more marks, girls, when you cross-reference with the other poems in the syllabus, or with any other poems also, not necessarily the syllabus, but over here you can compare this poem to Duckling Thrush. And Tennyson, Hardy, Arnold, they all belonged to the same age. Okay, and then he goes on to talk about certitude, nor certitude. Certitude means what? There's no certainty. There's nothing certain any longer in the world that looks so beautiful. And the world that looks so beautiful is actually bleak. Remember, he has used this word before, drear, and darkling, dark plain. Then the society, the bond that holds people together seems to be disintegrating. And he talks about the darkling plain. Why darkling plain? Darkling plain means dark. Okay, something that is dark. So he says the struggle, the darkling plain, it represents the struggle of human beings. Okay, the struggle that human beings go through in their quest for true knowledge, in their quest for a peaceful life. And the world now is swallowed by darkness plain. It is a deceptive world, a world where, you think something, but actually it is something else, a mere shadow without any substance, a substantial world, but seems to be a substantial world, but actually shadowy. And then the poem ends with a note of pessimism. How does he end the poem? He ends by saying that, and we are here on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms. What is alarm? An alarm is a sound that warns of danger, right? So we are swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, struggle of the human existence, struggle of the human's eternal quest for peace, for love, for faith, and flight, where ignorant armies over here referring to men without any religious faith, It's like a fish, out of water. You don't know what to do. You're at sea. Where ignorant armies clash by night. Again, the words that he uses, darkling, dark, night, again signifying darkness. And he says that now the world is like a battlefield. Okay, there's a battlefield where people are turning against each other. Why? Because naturally faith is eroded. The faith religion, which religion is a terrific bind of society, which we can see now, even now, and faith and humanity is forgotten. Why? Because religion is being abandoned. The present now is just full of despair, hopelessness, a feeling of despondency, and it is ironical that we start off with something so beautiful and we end with everything being an illusion. It is an extreme note of pessimism. Why? Because human beings, remember in the third stanza, when they talk about we too was once surrounded by the earth's girdle, the bright girdle furled around us, okay, signifying that we were encompassed by this great belt of faith that kept us safe. Okay, but now we have lost our moorings, we have lost that foundation, we have lost our faith, and we are fighting, but we do not know what we are fighting about. We are just fighting. It's like a struggle against yourself. You see, when a person is drowning and a person tries to save themselves, what happens? The person starts thrashing around. And in that process, because you do not think logically, you start thrashing around, you panic, you lose everything, and you sink. Okay, like that, we are fighting, but we are ignorant about what we are fighting for. Okay, and this metaphor extends into the soul of the poet and the other thinkers during the Victorian era. Okay, the troubled soul, the Darwin's theory played up hell with the ways of thinking, with religion. Okay, and now he feels that the only hope that is there is in love between mankind, and he tries to symbolize this through the love between him and his beloved, and the faith in each other, because these two are the ones who are present over here, okay, at Dover Beach. So our love, let us be true to one another, and for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. What a sad world that is, where there is absolutely nothing, where you're just, thrown to the mercy of yourself. Okay, where it is so materialistic, where human beings are so confused, where they have become non-religious in nature, where they have become skeptical, where now more emphasis is put on materialistic stuff, and therefore there is endless misery. And in this picture that the poet sees when he looks out on the sea in the channel, he looks out and he sees and he identifies and he uses the sea as a metaphor. He tries to explain to us the state of his confused mind, the alienation of man, okay, from everything that held him close, that held him grounded. So it was a very harsh statement that was made about the human conditions at that time by Matthew Arnold, but it was representative of the way a lot of thinkers thought during this Victorian age. Now, before we conclude, just the main thing, we are also, after this, we will put up a few points for you to go through, so to help you, okay? And just the main thing to remember is the theme that man's isolation and alienation, his longing for refuge, his fear of the future, religious and moral precepts that have shaken the faith of people in God and religion, especially keeping in mind the influence that Darwin's theory had at that time, the questioning the existence of God and the whole Christian scheme of things, okay, and the lament of the dying light and the sea of faith.